You're tuned in to the Stingbat Radio Network on FM 101.2 KRPG. Welcome to Dungeon Master Diaries. This is a podcast about Shadowdark and other role-playing games where two GMs talk about their recent experiences at the table and hopefully give you something useful that you can take to yours. On the show today, we discuss writer's block. Well, hello there, sages and adventurers. My name is Matt, and with me, as always, is my good friend and GM colleague, Jody. How you doing?
I am all right. Well, I'm going to be honest. You might say I'm a little anxious to get started.
Oh, boy. Well, today's episode focuses on the dreaded blinking cursor, the blank page, if you will. We're talking about getting started. So, Jody, take us to the desk.
Yeah, there I was, me and that blinking cursor. So if you've been listening to the show for a little bit, you know that I've been running a series, or I was running a series of micro campaigns, little short 3 to 4 session arcs, all loosely based around the Forgotten Realms, Saltmarsh region, sort of. I pick and choose what I want and smash it together into my whims. All of that was done with the intention of building an ongoing campaign from that region and setting something up. And I knew on the other side of those micro campaigns, I had some really clear objectives for the kind of campaign I wanted to start and roll out and get going. But if you've been listening for a while, you know that was some months ago, and it has been very slow to get underway. I knew I had a pool of players. I knew that pool of players seemed pretty interested, and I had a clear sense of what I wanted, and I just couldn't get underway. So I started pondering all of the possible options for what I could do and where to start. And I started doing some internet researches. And, it turns out there's actually a lot of information about role-playing games out there on the internet, including this piece right now. So it all sort of became somewhat overwhelming in the wish listing. And now months later, I have still not started, but I have dates set. I have people signed up. And I am more than ready to gather my friends, roll some dice, and get this campaign rolling. However, I'm here to tell you, my friends, the road was not easy. And while I feel excited about the adventures that lay ahead, I can't help but wonder if I could have got here a whole lot sooner.
All right, Jody, let us gather around the fire and talk about thinking about starting the process of thinking about starting a game.
Yeah, where to begin the beginning? How to start the starting?
Look, I think this is something that a lot of GMs will either have already dealt with, or currently dealing with, or will deal with in the future. So let's just kind of dive right in. And my inkling from where I've been sitting is that there were a number of different things that were kind of pushing back on you getting started. And we can kind of take them one at a time, but I kind of want to get a sense of like, what do you feel like now that you're coming out the other side, so to speak, right? What do you feel like was the biggest impediment to getting started for you? This, of course, might not translate to everybody's experience, but like for you, what do you feel like was the thing that maybe that you were coming to loggerheads with just trying to put the pen to the paper?
Man, it was really a two-horned demon in this case, as many are. The first issue is so dumb now that I'm on the other side of it, but it took no small amount of work to get to the other side of it. Was a map of all things, which might be surprising if you are listening and you're like, dude, you just said it's Saltmarsh in the Forgotten Realms. There's a giant 5e D&D book that covers all you need. I'm aware. I have it. It's fantastic, actually. It's a great resource. Unfortunately, if you are listening carefully, you'll go, wait a minute, that's not actually in the Forgotten Realms. And I will say, no, it is not. And then I mishmash things, and I have some Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay in there. So the map itself became a problem because I have a campaign world, and this was a whole new region of the campaign world. So how did I want to approach building that map? And what did the map need to have in it? Became another problem because I had a pile of resources I was very excited to include. So there had to be locations on the map to allow for exploration and hex crawl, because exploration and a little bit more open-ended kind of approach to the campaign was a thing I wanted. And that was all one of the horns. That pile was one horn.
Well, okay, so maybe we'll get to the second horn in a second, but so this is actually why I was really interested, is because I had picked up that you were thinking about hex crawl, about maybe some quasi sandboxy elements, and this is something that comes up consistently, and especially from folks who are maybe more familiar with running 5th edition book campaigns or adventure paths from Pathfinder, those kind of canned adventures where you will play through a plot, you'll play through a story, and it feels, I think, overwhelming for folks to think about how to prep a sandbox. And that's literally what I think you were running up against, was trying to take a bunch of modules and a bunch of ideas and pack them all into a campaign world. I mean, oftentimes I feel like we don't actually treat that with the level of significance it deserves. Like, it is actually a lot of work. And I think the people who maybe say it's not a lot of work have a very particular play style and game mastering style in mind. And I just don't think that comports and lines up with certainly you and what you need to feel like you're ready to get started rolling, and what I think a lot of people want to feel like. Like, I don't know. Does that ring true?
Oh, 100%. I was pondering this with shower thoughts the other night of quite literally that notion of these two. And I usually try to avoid like campification, because there's always so many spectrums of gray of how GMs approach their game. It's you are cobbling together influences and things. But in this regard, for ease of discussion, there's the folks who like really pure generative, that we sit down and I have some random tables maybe, and we're just going to see where play takes us. And maybe I don't even know what's in the next couple hexes of the map, and we're going to see together and just roll it up blank slate. That's great. I feel wildly uncomfortable running a game that way. That I know from past poor experiences of running sessions that does not play to my strengths. I very quickly lose threads and have players frustrated about like, but you said the dragon was out here. And I'm like, oh, I did. That's right. And I just lose things. So there's this other camp of like, I love running modules. I love running campaign books. I love running in, campaign worlds. And I love that support. And I love the piece I think gets missed a lot is I enjoy reading those old modules just for the sake of reading them. And then I'm super inspired by them and reading modern modules. I've been reading a bunch of newer stuff. I've grabbed for this particular campaign, 2 or 3 of the things I've grabbed are very new, like within the last calendar-ish year. So, I just enjoy reading that stuff, and then I find it inspirational, but then that means I have to do the work of cobbling that together so that I feel secure. I feel like I have pieces that are off the edge of the map, and I don't feel, and this is where the gray comes in, is I don't feel beholden to those resources. And I think that's where the oversimplification of things happens, is people go, oh, well, if you run modules, you're just running a script. And it's like, no, I change stuff all over the place to match how the session's going. But it requires that I know those things well enough to do that. And then when you're talking about a campaign that does have some sandbox elements, some, not West Marches, I don't think I would go that far, but it definitely has some sandbox vibes of like wanting a variety of hooks in a living organic world. That is a strength I think I bring to the table as a GM, from what my players tell me, of my world feels alive. Well, then I need lots of things going on. So paring things down also became a huge problem. But yeah, I think to that top point of like the freestyle generative thing is great if you feel secure running there. And I just don't.
Yeah. And we've talked about that in the past, and I certainly enjoy running that way, but not all the time. But I want to get to what you have coined the second horn. The other thing that was kind of stuck in your craw, so to speak. What was the other thing that was pushing back as you tried to move forward?
The BBEG of all role playing, the dread demon himself, scheduling.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I gotta be honest with you, I wasn't sure what this was.
It was scheduling there were some really specific wants out of this. And I'm going to run through them. They're so unique to our table and this table group and what we're going to do that I can see where this might feel like, oh, how's that useful to me? But I just want to lay out some of these as like, hey, I bet you can relate to this as a general idea space. So, I'm going to talk about my specifics, but if you're a listener, think about like what are scheduling conflicts you've had to deal with. So the top one was, Matt and I have talked a ton about, we have our Dolmenwood game. It's largely built out of work colleagues and former work colleagues and friends. My wife is not a part of that game, and she and I met because of role playing, like full stop, that not even together, just a roommate, and she was in the play group of my roommate, and it was cool. So not getting to play with her is not like a huge bummer and like, oh, woe is me, Dolmenwood sucks because of it. Far from it. It's in some ways it's great because of it at times. But I do miss playing with her. Like I miss having that opportunity. The other piece is you, Matt, like wanting you to get out from behind the screen once in a while.
I got to get to playing, Jody.
Yeah. We got to get you out from behind the shadow dark screen. And I always love saying that because neither of us use screens. So that was another piece of, and what that meant was that anytime you're running, you can't play at the same time. We can't. Those are two separate, events in the time stream continuum or whatever. Third bit is there is a player who does travel to our Dolmenwood game, who lives out of the area, who comes all the way down for like 2.5 hours. And I was like, man, wouldn't it be cool if the next day, and they often crash at our house, the next day we could have this other game. So trying to sync up a pair of unrelated games was a thing. And in the past, there's a handful of folks who I wanted to make sure I included in this because they approach gaming with a similar mindset. So I had my wish list of people, and I wanted to be available to all of them, but it was like 8, 9, maybe 10 people. And going, how do I accommodate all of them at the table and accommodate scheduling for all of them? And have historically, frankly, screwed that up because I've pulled too small of groups together, and then inevitably, because adults with busy lives, 1 or 2 people have something come up, and then, well, are we going to play? Are we not going to play? And thankfully found some really excellent resources to move past that exact hurdle. But who's in, who's out is kind of the 10,000 foot version. So yeah, it was all of those things having to live together at once, of accommodating certain players, managing other known schedules, and, frankly, just having some flexibility in it.
Yeah. So I think there's been a lot of conversations about scheduling recently. There was I believe a SciShow episode, which sort of was a hilarious dovetailing of many of my interests outside of role-playing games, because Hank Green, one of my favorite people in the world, brother of John Green, who, I mean, the two of them have so much of my heart belongs to those two gentlemen in so many different ways. I won't belabor the point here, but he came out with a video talking about scheduling and talking about some of the mathematics behind and some of the statistics behind scheduling. Sly Flourish has some great advice on this, and I just think like there's been folks talking about scheduling recently, and I know that it's sort of such a common problem that I don't want to belabor the point. I think you did a great job of kind of laying out the complexities of this situation that you're dealing with, and I know that folks will see some of their own scheduling challenges in what you laid out, and certainly will have their own unique situation. But one thing that I think is interesting about scheduling that I do think is maybe not talked about a lot is the fact that there are broadly speaking, kind of from my perspective, there are the folks who are just like not in a place where there seems to be a lot of TTRPG players or folks who are interested in playing Shadowdark, right? Like that is a legitimate issue, is not just scheduling, but getting people to be willing to try the game. And then there's the folks who, have kind of a wonderful but also challenging situation where like we have a lot of people in our area who want to play RPGs, and we have a lot of people who like Shadowdark and want to play. And honestly, we run up against the problem of not being able to have enough time in the day/week/month/year to run all the games we want to run, not just of Shadowdark but of other RPGs. And I know there's a lot of room between those two spectrums, but I think I have a lot of empathy for folks who struggle with scheduling, but there's so many unique situations that I just don't know how much like advice there is other than like, hey, we see you, and every GM has to deal with this at some point. So
I think the one piece of advice I could offer that for me has been tremendously helpful did come from the Hank Green video, does come from Sly Flourish, and is tied into something you've been doing for a while with our Dolmenwood game, is a minimum threshold of play. If there are this many players, we play. And what is that minimum number? And if you're going to go with 100% of folks have to be there, that's tough. You have zero room for error. The other thing that I am trying out and have already seen both benefit and a little bit of drawback from is letting people know, hey, are you willing to be an alternate? My table is full, but I would love to get you in. And if somebody cancels, would you like me to reach out? And I already did that. Like on the calendaring of the first set of games, I went, hey, a bunch of people signed up all at once. And like literally it was at the same time I got the pling, 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 and I couldn't like time stamp them out. And so I had to reach out to the person that I did know like a little bit later and was like, hey, are you willing to be an alternate on that day? I can physically only accommodate comfortably 5 players at my table, 6
Right.
people with me running. So that notion of like, ask for more people than you need, and then what is your minimum threshold? Those 2 pieces of scheduling advice, I think have a lot of legs. And I kind of jumped ahead to the end of things because, to be honest, I want to get back to the first horn for a minute.
So scheduling aside, let's talk about actually, prior to recording here, you showed me this like beautiful map that you'd drawn, and I kind of want to talk about the map specifically in just a moment. But look, when I want to drill down on something that I think might actually be really useful, which is how do you see, or let me rephrase this, because what I was going to ask is like, how do you see your prep influencing what happens at the table? But what I actually want to ask is, when you were looking at that blank cursor and you were struggling to kind of think about how all these things were coming together, was a part of that trying to envision what play would look like at the table, or what part of the I need to put all this stuff together? You talked about feeling like you were going to be confident at the table. I don't think we've ever really talked about this, but like, what does that look like? Like, what does that physically look like? What do you need, either physically or digitally, to feel confident? Because I actually have some things that I think are much different than you in this regard. And I just think that would be kind of an interesting path to walk down for a sec.
Okay, because I used the analogy of a demon with 2 horns, I'm going to use this caveat to go, oh, alas, there was a third horn, much like a third rail, that maybe if we have time at the end, I would like to talk a little bit about, that is, and also on this question. What do I need to feel confident as a GM in my process and getting past, like, I'm looking at this cursor on a blank page, just blinking away and taunting me. The longer it sits there, the heavier it gets. I swear to God, I can hear a funeral bell toll with each click of it. Is I need an outline. Like, for me, the outline is everything. I need a map and I need an outline. Where are we, and what might happen? And I think that's a big one, especially if it is somebody who is coming to this from the I run modules like I like to. And again, I'm always really vocal about like, no, it's okay to like modules, because so much of the internet, especially around the OSR, is dunks on modules. And I'm like, nope, they're cool and they're still fun. And like,
Jody, the resident apologist for modules.
No apology. I'm the freaking out in the front with a.
I love that you do that because
waving the banner.
Yeah, it's important.
All right, so I need the when and the where and the what, right? And the when doesn't matter because fantasy world until we're up and playing, and then when matters a lot because any sort of sandbox vibes, you need to know when the hell things are happening. So where are we? And then what are the threads I want to give my players? And this is actually something recently, Kelsey did a kind of AMA overview of Western Reaches as part of the Kickstarter for, well, she did one about West Marches, but it was tangentially for Western Reaches.
Dude, I mean,
reaching
just as a brief tangent, she has already messed this up. She was on the Ship of the Dead podcast that came out recently, and like on the State of the OSR from Gary Kahn. And I think at least once said West Marches when she was attempting to refer to her own product at the Western Reaches. And I find it very charming that the product's name is so synonymous with this style of play that it is very easy to transpose the two.
So you got to know, and what she talked about was, and what I asked as she was doing the wrap up and questions, and I threw a question, and it was very sweet. She recognized us from her interview, which was cool. Was that, hey, how do you start? You have to seed something. Handing players a map and being, you are in the town of Fay End. Where would you like to go? Is just as bad as you are in a tavern. You can talk to each other now if you want to. I have silver eyes. It's that bad. It's because there's no framework for choice. And her answer, and what I settled on that I was leaning towards anyway, but was a great, hey, there's the pat on the back of yeah, go do that, is pick 3 things. Pick 3 things, and for your players go, here are 3 leads to pursue. And then I could start building my outline. And once I went, here are the 3 leads I'm going to give them, I had the big stack of modules and I started going, ooh, this part from this one and this part from this one. And well, shoot, this one's only 12 pages long. So the whole thing of this one, and this one's only 4 pages long. Props to the one that's 4 pages long, by the way. I can't wait to talk about it. I hope you guys go there.
Yeah. I can't ask about any of these because I'm going to potentially play through them.
Yeah. They're around Saltmarsh, but they have nothing to do with Saltmarsh. Congratulations. There's your help. So
fabulous.
Yeah, but that allowed me to start taking that giant stack of wish list inspiration and paring it down to something usable, which is really, to some degree, it's the hard part of writing. Is I'm in a tangent here for a sec. Hang with me. So used to be an English teacher, high school English teacher, and one of the hardest things that I could teach to my students that was super valuable was write more than you have to, and then start just cutting all of the stuff that's not great. Nobody wants to do that because you had to write more than you needed. But there's so much power in it because when I do this mountain of research and then start writing down all these, just bang them out as you get them ideas. Don't filter them. Don't pare them down. You're going to have really good stuff in the giant pile of ideas. So how do you start grappling with shrinking the idea? How do you start grappling with making the idea smaller? And once I got my hands on, I have the map and I know what the map needs to look like. I didn't want to draw the map. I didn't want to draw the map, but I finally just did. And I'm really stoked with how it turned out. But
it turned out great, man.
But
we should post a picture of it because I think you're underselling how well it turned out. I think it's awesome. So
thanks. I look forward to it's still somewhat in progress. But I'm not going to exaggerate, 8 hours. I will shout out, if you haven't looked at it before, JP Couvert and How to Draw Maps, and then Map Crow. If you're like, I'm kind of curious about the drawing map things, you cannot go wrong starting with those 2. There is one more. I think it's called Gary Draws. I'll get it found and shared as well. Tight, punchy videos that if you want to take it on, super dope. This is Jody from the editing table. It's maps by Owen, not Gary Draws. Yeah, but I'm all over the place. So help me rein it back in here.
No, there was a lot. There's a lot there, but I think one thing that I heard. This is very interesting because very little of what you described rings true for me. Yeah. So, and I think this is probably one of the places where you and I differ the most. just in terms of running games in particular, because for me, like my first and foremost thing is I need a playlist. Like this is a very funny thing that
I desperately want to know if there's anybody like I know there is. I don't want to single you out like you're the only one, you freaking weirdo. But like I want to hear from the people for whom this is true. So say more about your playlist.
I do everything in terms of prep for games with a soundtrack in the back. And that soundtrack is not necessarily the same as what I will be playing during the session. But I have probably about 10 curated sound playlists of music that I use for fantasy role-playing games that are everything from like peaceful music that I play when players are coming into the room that kind of just like lingers in the back, to travel peaceful music that like has another particular... Everything that I do about like when I'm prepping a game is based on tone and based on how do I establish, not even for the players, but for me, how do I establish like the tone and mood of the game? And I don't know why this is the way that my brain works, but it is that when I am processing a session, when I'm prepping a session, I always think about not necessarily movies and film, but I do use a lot of like movie and film scores and soundtracks as the background for when I am prepping. And I don't know why this works for me, except that a lot of my prep and a lot of getting started on a new campaign is based on mood and tone. That is how I the lens through which I view role-playing games is mood and tone. And I don't know that I really realized that until recently when I was prepping a 5th edition game for this past Monday, which unfortunately ended up getting canceled, but it had a much different tone, and I realized I was listening to different music, and I was prepping a much different session than the one before, which had taken place in the Shadowfell and was like very dark and very gritty and very Shadowfell-esque. So the thing that I need first is a soundtrack. I need a vibe. I need a tone. And then I need hooks. That's it. And those hooks are usually... I need like a couple of NPCs. I need a location. But I don't need often the level of detail that you do. And that has always been interesting to me because you feel very much like you need to be able to draw on a broad set of pieces of information about the world. And I don't know, I find it very interesting, and I do not operate in that way. Like if I am presented with an opportunity to improvise, as you know, and to use generative methods at the table, I prefer that. Not fully.
Right. I mean, see Dolmenwood, like...
Well, and this is where I wanted to take this, was like, Dolmenwood provides the ultimate structure and the ultimate framework. I still don't read very much before we play, because I know the world so well by now that, like, talking about a session, like, we're talking about getting started. But before we got started... Before I started running Dolmenwood, I just dove in, and I just didn't really care if I got things wrong. And I know that that's not the way that most people operate. And I was more concerned with, can I get some fairy forest music that sounds correct? And I don't know. That I'm saying this out loud. I might change my mind. There's probably something I'm missing, but that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Right. And I think that there is actually a shared thread between these two of that notion of vibes. Right. You know, you told me not all that long ago, for as long as we've been playing together, I was a little sheepish when I realized that this was the magic sauce. I should have told you day one, was that like the best way to think of the game I run is a Western.
Yeah.
Yeah. That it's a fantasy world. Don't change the wrapping. Nobody's wearing cowboy hats. I guess maybe they are, but like there's
my
dragons.
Next character will be.
Your dwarf wizard model has a tremendously big hat. It's very impressive. We're all very impressed, sir. But that vibe, right? that grab onto that notion of frontier and exploration. And again, that's very OSR. For me, I need that information so that I can get down to what is the dirt like here? What kind of trees am I going to describe in this area? What is this town actually like? And I need, for me, again, I cannot stress this point enough. I keep saying it, and I'm going to keep saying it.
No, yeah.
For me, I need to see that world complexly in a way that makes sense in my head so that when I am asked an off-the-cuff question, I can go, yes, I see this, I see this, I see this. And for you, the music is what does that, right? It's the like, this is what these trees feel like. This is what this dirt feels like. This is what the walls of this abbey feel like. This is what the gates of, oh man, I cannot wait to go to Brackenwald. This is what the gates or walls or streets of Brackenwald, like that vibe. For me, it's a level of who are the people? What are the city? What is the map? I'm not going to memorize the map, but I need to have build this picture in my head. Started college as an art major for a reason. I see things, as a lot of us do, see things in pictures. So the more complete that picture becomes in my head, the more comfortable I feel running. And for you, it's musical, right? It's that the more I can really feel that vibe, the more I'm like, oh, I got this. I know how to answer these questions.
Yeah, and I will also say that this is something I probably should have brought up from the beginning, which is that you're cobbling together a setting of your own, a homebrew setting, right? And I haven't done that for a while. I would like to. I also don't know how good I am at that. Like I also don't know how interested I am in running my own homebrew setting. Not because I don't think I can, but because my tendency is mood, is tone. Coming up with ideas for religions or for maps is of secondary interest to me when I'm thinking about starting a new campaign. I would much rather run in someone else's world where they have answered questions that speak to me and that I like, and some of which I'm going to change and whatever. We all do that. I don't, coming up with stuff from the ground up has always felt to me like secondary to the thing that I enjoy doing, which is establishing a mood and a tone, and then using that as the basis from which we improvise and make decisions and change the game world irrevocably, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, one thing I wanted to ask you is, in this vein, so you came up with a map. You are cobbling together modules from Greyhawk, from the realms, whatever the realms are called.
You forgot them. Oh, I don't know if that was a bit, dude. And I'm impressed if it was.
That was not a bit. That was not a bit.
Honest, forgot.
It's great. Leave it in.
Right. And the old world of Warhammer fantasy roleplay. Yeah, that's there too.
And then, of course, you're also bringing in your own ideas.
Yep.
Right. And there's probably actually more of that. Right. That's the mortar upon which, these actually fairly small bricks kind of sit. And one thing I wanted to ask you is, how useful do you find like random tables? Because this is where we also seem to disagree, because I love crap like the Tome of Adventure Design and the Monster Overhaul and like stuff that's just like random tables, roll a D20, roll a D12, roll a D100, whatever it is. Did you use those? Do you use those? Are they helpful for dealing with the blinking cursor, or do they cause more problems than they solve?
They cause more problems than they solve.
I
have a grip of them. Like
question.
Every GM who's been here for a minute, you have a pile of them. The Tome of 100, the book of the vile book of 1001 squidgy things to happen, when you're sleeping with grubs, whatever it is.
That is it. That is the most specific title I've heard in a while. And I hilariously, I want that table.
Yeah. And I want that book on my shelf next to Geologist Primer. Because for me, it's about reading about these fantasy worlds and then becoming inspired by them and thinking about how the really cool ideas I'm picking up on fit in with my notion of a fantasy world, which is purely homage to all of the classics that, not all the classics of Appendix N. I'll be honest, my sword and sorcery reading and experience is super limited, I've realized. I thought it was pretty robust. It is not. It is a very specific genre of things that have inspired me. And while it's a blending of all of those D100 tables, unless somehow I wrote them, they don't jive with it. And so I'm having to reset the clock of, so where does a 10-eyed oracle fit into the milieu of, what I refer to as a Radris? That's my region, right? That's what I call it. And I don't know where that name came from. It spouted out of my head, and somebody, if you know, please tell me, because I'm like, where did this word come from? So good luck. But like, I don't have a 10-eyed oracle, and like, dragons are a big deal in my world. They're not a dime a dozen. So when I read fiction or a module that like, oh, this is this special thing over, oh, cool. That kind of gritty Westernness. So I love reading the tables, but using them at the table, that's 2 tables, too many, was right. It is very difficult. Because it can lead to things that are derailing and discordant with that carefully curated world that I've built in my head that for me, and this is the big difference, I'm like, no, that's like the juice. That's what I'm excited about. Yeah. And then I'm excited to go see how I want my players to make me adjust the world to fit their fantasy. I don't want random stuff to just write my fantasy.
Yeah, see, I like when random stuff writes my fantasy.
Yeah.
Like and I obviously taken to the extreme, each of these methods are
paralyzing.
Right. And like hate to have to call that out, but like of course that's kind of the one of the takeaways here is like, if you go too far in either direction, too random or too prescriptive, whatever. But ultimately for me, the reason that I like random tables is I am looking for something to give me an idea, a spark. And a random table, I will sometimes roll on a random table when I am prepping a session, or in the case of this episode, when I'm trying to kind of design something from the ground up. And I will have an idea in my head, and I can't tell whether or not the idea is good. And I'll roll on a random table, and I will get a completely different idea. This actually happened to me when I was designing. I am drawing from scratch, so blinking cursor. I had a blank piece of graph paper in front of me recently, and I am drawing a dungeon that you and the Dolmenwood crew may very well explore on Friday in our next session. And I was trying to decide room structure and room layouts of this dungeon complex. And I was struggling. And so I went to my usual random tables. I went to Raging Swan, the Dread Thingonomicon, the Tome Adventure Design, etc., the Monster Overhaul, blah, blah, blah. And I just kept going back to these tables, and every time I would roll on them, I wouldn't use the result.
Right. Yep.
I would just use the result to either confirm or deny the idea that was in my head. It was a reference of, is this idea unique and interesting enough? Because if a random table comes up with a weird idea, it's a point of comparison. It's just all it is to me. And I think this is where random tables get a bad rap is I treat random tables with a heavy dose of not disdain, but of almost contempt, where I'm like, how dare you tell me what to do? My idea is actually quite cool compared to what you just told me, and I'm going to do what I want to do. I use them almost as like something to argue with, something to like to tell me like, hey, maybe like it's someone in the room that I can tell, I can say that is a dumb idea, and I'm not offending anybody.
Well, it's the best case scenario of devil's advocate, right?
Right. And like some of those ideas are actually good, and I use them, but I think a lot of people assume that when you roll on a random table that you either use the result or whatever. I literally roll on random tables so that I can reject ideas out of hand and go, well, I guess I'm not going that direction because I hate that. And I don't know if maybe I'm the only one.
I do the same thing. That's the total weird twist is like, hey, it didn't account for this episode having so much of like, I can't tell you this, or like, whatever.
Well, yeah, but that's fine.
There's a module I used that has a old one, and it has a variety of things included. There's actually a variety of adventures in one module.
It has an old one, or it is an old one?
Yep, it is an old one. It's an old and a kind of obscure module.
All right, you've given everything away.
I have, and I have used the name on the cover, and a location is on my map, and I might offer it as a hook in the first. No, it's one of the 3 hooks in the first session. The adventure has nothing to do. It's just the hook. It's literally just the. I was like, that's a dope hook on this map in this place, and I can use this map as part of a template. Listeners, if you see the map, a billion of you will guess it immediately. You'll know it. But it's
we'll post the map in the Discord and
I'll be nice.
You'll have to share your creative works with the masses.
Oh, gross.
Anyway, they will love it. They're going to love it.
Well, we'll see. But yeah, so to that same point though of the random table being like, how dare you tell me what to do? I'm like looking at this. I'm like, that's cool. What's the adventure? Read the adventure. Neat. Yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm doing this other thing though, and I'm stealing all the ideas to do something totally different.
Yeah, I think that is maybe where both of us do converge quite a bit. Is you and I have no issue throwing stuff out, and especially like throwing stuff out that we've created or throwing stuff out that other people have created. And that is sort of the premise of why I think we get along as GMs who run very different games. Is ultimately you and I just we're pretty confident that the ideas that we come up with, once we feel they are ready, are good.
Yeah.
And Matt Colville has a video about this, this kind of the strange, I don't know, that like self-centered quality of the artist and the kind of the radical nature of being like, you know what the world needs? To hear my ideas.
Yeah.
And it can be uncomfortable, but also I actually think that as a GM, it's a skill, obviously, but like, this is my last question for you. What are your thoughts on that? Like, how do you get to that point where you're like, okay, now this is read. I've read the module. The module's title and hook are cool.
And half of it's a dope map.
And half it's a dope map. But I know what I want to do well enough, and I know I'm confident enough in what I want to do that I'm going to throw the rest of it out. And how do you get to the point where you're like, this is ready for prime time? Or how do you know when it's ready for prime time? If you ever know.
There's 2 things there. One, how I know when I know I am like, oh, I'm ready, is again two kind of parts of this. One, I will prep however much time you give me. If you said, Jody, we're going to play tomorrow, I will be ready to play at whatever time you tell me tomorrow. And it's like, hey, Jody, you're going to run tomorrow. Cool. What time? This time? And I will prep until the last possible minute I can. It will be, and not prep in the sense of I'm sitting there writing and drafting and drawing and whatever, but in the sense of it's living in my head.
Yeah, you're ruminating. Yeah. I'll do the same thing.
So that's one layer of this. But when I know I am like, no, this is a banger and I'm ready to sit down and do this thing, is when I'm excited. And like, that's one of those, like, it feels
very helpful for the listeners.
Right. I was like, that's super dumb advice. Like, when you're excited about your project, but there's a weird ebb and flow that I want to talk about here. Is you get the initial spark of like, hey, I'm going to do this GMing thing. It sounds fun. Or like, oh, I have this idea for a campaign. And like, this campaign has been really weird in like how it came together. The inspirations for this next launch of mine are very unique. I've never come to wanting to run this way. Usually it's a seed of an idea that I'm like, oh, that sounds like a fun thing. I want to run that. And then you go through, I think for most people, you go through in miniature painting, it's often called the ugly phase.
Sure.
Of like, you're just getting your first set of base coats down and you're trying to figure out which colors go where, and things are looking kind of janky and you haven't, really polished up any colors. And if you're new to painting, you never really get out of the ugly phase and it can be disheartening and like you lose confidence and all things suck. And then if you keep going, you get to a point where it becomes very exciting again. And that initial Hankrin Fernale of Runehammer calls it the beginner's mind that is excited by everything. That reemerges. It will come back because you're like, oh, I remember when I was excited and I wanted this thing. And now I'm towards the end of the process. I'm excited by the process getting to its next evolution, because the end of a process is the beginning of the next process, to get weirdly philosophical about it. So now I'm at the beginning of bringing my friends together to play. And that's very exciting based on the idea. So it's that feeling of excitement when I am like, this idea is cool and I want to play it, whether I got to, and that's really, I think in maybe a actionable phrasing of this, if you as a GM are looking at what you're about to run, you are looking at your tables that you're going to generate from, and you have your first kind of hooks laid out, and you're like, oh, this is going to be cool. I'm excited to see where this goes. And here's the rub. My players are going to be excited. I'm excited for them to have this experience. When I feel that excitement, that specifically of like, no, I'm juiced for my players to get to see this. You and I both love to cook, and we've talked about this before, of like, I am excited to share this meal with you. I've cooked all day or whatever, and I'm really excited to sit down and have this meal with my friends. And I know I'm going to like the meal. I sure hope they do. But I know I'm going to like it, and I'm excited to see how they react. That point is when I'm like, yeah, I'm stoked. That's really dope. The other side of this coin, where I think you and I are pretty different, is, so how do you get the confidence to get through the ugly phase?
Yeah, I think therein lies every GM's challenge, right?
Yeah.
Is how do you get through? And I think, this is where advice ends and our sort of lived experiences end, and what begins is a path that everyone has to walk down, which is a creative path that is hard and filled with failure and success, and hopefully, more success than failure. But like, ultimately, for me, when I'm in the ugly phase of prepping a campaign, the best way out is always through. Sometimes there's nothing for it but to just kill your darlings and do the hard work of editing, get the big black Sharpie out, right, to use as many metaphors as I possibly can. But that's the way I deal with it. Is I go in and I just, this because I've done this to you in our creative endeavors, Jody, over the years, and in many other aspects, where I will just go in and clean house and like, nope, this isn't good enough. I mean, there's an entire episode of this show that may never see the light of day because right. I basically was like, I edited the whole thing and was like, not good enough.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that is the way that I operate. And I don't know that like, I will take things that I have created and I will delete large quantities of them. I will blow up a campaign world. I will, kill an NPC. I will do something just absolutely drastic and dramatic to reset everything to zero. Not always with the best results, but that's how I get through the ugly phase.
And the piece I admire and I benefit from in getting to work with you on all kinds of things is that you move forward. Right? That when you do that, you move forward, which sounds weird because you're like, I'm deleting all this stuff, so I'm going backwards. No, you're not. You're creating new pathways forward, that the pathways you've been on have tightened, shrunk, atrophied, or seen their natural conclusion. So we need new pathways. So blow it up and start again. And that's rad. And it benefits me tremendously. Where I get stuck is, and there's a lot of names for it. There's one I know it from board gaming, is analysis paralysis, that you just get stuck thinking. So that's one thing. And when you're planning stuff and you are fighting through some writer's block and you're in that analysis paralysis step of, I have 12 modules and campaign books in front of me and I don't know which one to pick. I think for me, I can still do all right, I'm going to go through it. I'm going to push through it and just keep reading, and or I'm going to just go, which one is my favorite? This one. Okay, let's reset. There's another piece of it though that is, psychology wise, like it's imposter syndrome. You start having doubts about your own ability to produce the thing. And that's, where Colville's video of like, he just candidly says like, I don't have those doubts. I just think my ideas are cool. He has never said anything that is less relatable to me than that of like, I just think my ideas are cool. No, I think my ideas are garbage. I just think my friends want to play my ideas because they keep telling me they do. And so I go, well, there must be something there. And I have to, learn to work through that. And this is, it's weird because I have a lifetime of doing creative things that says I'm reasonably skilled at this and should feel good about it. And there will be times, and I really actually want to address this briefly, even though it's kind of a downer, of like, if you are planning something and you are in that writer's block phase and you are at I want to do this campaign, but what if my ideas suck? And what if my friends hate my ideas? And what if they stop being my friends because my ideas suck? Okay, that's probably not going to happen. And if they do, you need new friends. But that line of thinking is real. And I watch people online where I can, like, maybe I'm projecting, most definitely, but I can read between the lines where I'm like, that's actually what's going on. What's going on isn't that they're having a hard time starting. It's that they're afraid their idea sucks. And, so how do you get past this? And I'm not going to lie, like that third horn I mentioned of the devil metaphor that really that's it. Much like the third rail. It was like, I also got into a place just where I was like, dude, I just don't feel good about myself and my ideas right now. Funny enough, what really got me over the hump in all of this is I had a particularly bad day and I went outside and I sat on, we have a porch with a sofa in the shade. And luckily our back porch looks out on a pretty nice view. And I sat there with a pen and paper and I just started doodling these maps and was like, you know what? I'm not even with a real goal. I just want to create something. And it wasn't really it was like, I kind of hoped maybe it would turn into the campaign, but it was really just about, I just want to create this thing. I just want to do something. And I take to use the kids, as the kids would say, just going to go touch grass. And I kind of did. And it was one of the skills I've learned over the years that helps, but it was more about, I put all the books away and I just took this piece of paper and went, I'm just going to do this one small thing that brings me some peace and quiet. I'm going to go hang out with my wife and go on a nice walk. And it was days before I could get to that point of like things had to be put away and I had to kind of call a stop. But then when I got excited again, I could see everything clearly because of the feeling crappy was all the lies I was telling myself got out of the way because I'd let them have their time to be jerks. So, that's usually we don't get that like touchy feely about stuff.
This is super important though,
but,
Jody.
Yeah. Like,
and I wasn't sure. I knew that was going on. I wasn't sure if you wanted to kind of to go there because that's some real stuff, right? Like this is a vulnerable thing to do. Like to put your ideas in front of other people and say, I think these ideas are cool and I think you'll think they're cool. Do you think that they're cool? Like that is really hard.
Yeah. And if I backtrack to some of the stuff we talked about earlier of like, you're like, give me NPCs that I can do dumb voices for and I am stoked. That is too much insecurity for me. Like that freewheeling is that open-endedness. It's that for me is like, no, I am as a person and being asked to step out of a comfort zone when I'm doing something that should be fun. And that, there's that creative process. There is an undeniable level of vulnerability. And some people, bless them. And I love that these people are out there. I draw a lot of inspiration from them. Some of you who are listening are like, I genuinely never consider this. Good. Don't. Keep creating. Yep. We need you to keep creating. And if you're like, no, I like really struggle with this. Yeah, a lot of us do. It's how many tortured artists are famous? A lot of them. Like it's cliche. They're like, oh, the tortured artist. Yeah, because it's a creative process and you are sharing yourself with others. So yeah, it's natural you're going to kick open some boxes, is a phrase we use in our house, of like some of those psychological boxes are going to get rattled around. That just means you're doing cool stuff. You're doing stuff that matters to you.
First of all, thank you for. I mean, this really is kind of the first time on the program that we've delved to use a sort of proper Shadow Darkian term that we've delved into the sort of shadow dark of ourselves, if you will.
Oh, that was good. That was
but I mean, not to. I don't want to trivialize it because that is the kind of core conceit of an episode like this, of this isn't something that happened at the table, but it is something that happens at a desk or at a table. And it's hard because you're doing a lot of this game master stuff alone. Like, the premise of this show is based on having someone else to talk to this about this stuff with. And a lot of folks just don't have that benefit with any regularity. They have it maybe on Discord, or they have it maybe in places that are just like less personal. And so hopefully this conversation was useful in some way. So let's hear from our sponsor. We'll come back with a few key takeaways and we'll wrap this episode up. This episode is brought to you by Mystic Ladle, the only breakfast cereal forged by wizards and legally distinct from any arcane breakfast food currently under trademark. Look, adventuring life is hard, and you fought through the night, your thieves chewing on a bootlace, and your last real meal was a handful of moss and a dream. What you need is something fast, filling, and not magically poisoned. Mystic Ladle cereals are crafted with wizard-grade ingredients like freeze-dried ghost berries, spectral oats, and abyssal protein puffs. No added sugar and no cursed additives. Just clean, adventurer-approved fuel to get you through the next goblin ambush. You can choose from delicious flavors like Cinnamon Spellblast, TM, Void Berry Crunch, TM, Mana Maple Swirl, TM, a limited planar release, and new Oatlich Charms, TM, part of a balanced breakfast and possibly a phylactery. Use code BREAKFASTRITUAL at checkout today to get 10% off your first enchanted box, and it gets delivered via teleportation circle directly into your campfire. No more soggy rations, no more mystery meat and porridge, just pure, crunchy, eldritch goodness. Mystic Ladle, because even heroes need a cereal that doesn't try to bite back. All right, Jody, let us bring this topic into the light with some core takeaways. You have the first one. What do you got for us?
A little what we would call in education circles, start at the end. Think about what kind of campaign do you want to run? What are those big goals, right? Mine was a little bit more sandbox, still want to maintain some plot structure, but with a more sandbox, go explore the map kind of thing. So I knew I had that to anchor the process, and then you can start picking and choosing through the giant wish list of possibility.
I'm going to take a note out of your book here, Jody. I'm going to say go for a walk as my first core takeaway, but I'm going to add my own little spin to it, which is, go for a walk, or really that's a stand-in for do something where you can kind of get your mind away from the thing that is kind of eating at you, but put on some music and kind of, give yourself or do something that can bring you some kind of inspiration. I just think there's a lot to be said for letting your mind rest.
Yeah, pretty drive with some good tunes or whatever your comfort level is there of unplug and let your brain wander. It's good stuff. All right, I'm going to go with where do you draw your inspiration, or if it's Shadow Dark, where do you get your luck tokens? But where do you, yeah, it was terrible. I just headlocked that right in. No, but be honest with yourself. I mentioned that it turns out, Tolkien and the Warhammer Fantasy roleplay world of the old world, and very little, despite what I talked about of the actual D&D lore, is featured heavily in my fantasy. And, what are those key touchstones for you? Being honest about that will give you a metric, whether you're rolling on random tables or you're cobbling together your own homebrew. They'll give you kind of a North Star of this idea is rad or this idea sucks.
My final takeaway is a little bit earnest, but I think a nice place to end the show. I'm going to draw on your inspiration from our discussion, which is be kind to yourself. It's easy to tell yourself that your ideas are bad or that what you're coming up with isn't cool or isn't going to work at the table. But ultimately, all of us GMs are doing something that is creative. And with that is always going to come a sense of, I don't know if this idea is cool or if it's going to work. And you know what? Hopefully this show and all of the other wonderful stuff that has spawned out of the explosion of TTRPGs shows you that there's lots of different ways to do things. There's lots of different ways to present cool ideas to your players, and that the best thing to do is to roll dice with your friends and have some fun. So that's what I kind of wanted to leave us with.
Can't argue with that. As the torchlight grows dim, we hope you're able to find something useful in this episode that you can take into a future game. If you have any questions or unique experiences from your table that you'd like us to discuss in a future episode, you can email us at dmdiariespod@gmail.com. You can also reach out via YouTube or Facebook, or best of all in the Dungeon Master Diaries thread in the Shadow Dark Discord channel. You can find links on those feeds to any other materials we reference in this show's notes. And until next time, later, nerds.
Dungeon Master Diaries is a production of the Stingbat Radio Network. It is produced by Jody Kropholler and edited by Matt Bruner. Our intro and outro music is composed by Christian Schuster. Dungeon Master Diaries is an independent production. It is not affiliated with the Arcane Library, LLC. Shadow Dark RPG is a product of the Arcane Library. Copyright 2023.
Ka-ching!